Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nick Show. So I hope everybody had a good, had a very Merry Christmas. I hope you guys got a lot of things during Christmas. I hope you guys saw a bunch of family and everything. Best wishes. So today I'm going to be talking about something. I guess it's got to do with Christmas. I guess it's giving, but it's not really giving. It's foreign aid. It's U.S. foreign aid. And I'm also going to be talking about the IMF, which is basically the World Bank. So to start off, I'd like to say that, our government spends about 1% of its total budget a year in foreign aid. And I'd like to give kind of like an overview of how foreign aid works. So basically the government appropriates so much money to be given to these non-governmental agencies, which are also contract management centers, and basically it's just they get the contract. It's probably like a buddy of a senator or a congressman, as usual. People who make the most money always have these connections with these politicians. But I mean, that's part of the problem, obviously. But so the money goes to these non-governmental agencies, and what they do with the money is that they actually charge a administrative fee. So about 30% of the money actually goes to these non-governmental agencies, and a lot of the time it's not even 30%. A lot of the time, most of the time, it's actually more, depending on which country you're giving to. So if you're giving to Afghanistan, that's a country that's in the that just got over a war or still is in a war, with Al Qaeda or whatever. So they actually take around 70% of that money and put it towards administrative fees. And these contract management centers are actually located either in the country, but mostly in Washington. So Washington, or Rome as I'd like to call it, they get most of the money. So that's one of the many reasons why Washington's doing so good, is because a lot of the money goes straight back to Washington. So then these non-governmental agencies, they take that money and they send it off to its destination, wherever it needs to go. And almost 100% of the time it's given to certain governments. So it'll be given to the Afghani government, be given to some African government or whatever, and that's when the real fraud and the corruption and all that other stuff begins. So every single time you hear about foreign aid being given out, you can count on it being given out to corrupt people, to people who steal it, people who misuse it, and it rarely ever gets to women and children. So for instance, in 2011, around 2011, our government gave around $73 billion to the Afghan government. And what did they do with it? Who knows? They basically, people, auditors and people who saw what the money went through, it actually ended up going to mostly the government, the people who support the government. So, they say, people on the internet, they say around 2% of it actually got to the people who actually needed it. The women and children who need food, the people that we bombed, the people who are suffering because we bombed them, the children. But, so when people think about foreign aid, you got to realize that almost all the money goes to either Washington or corrupt politicians, murderers, thieves. Almost all the money goes to those people. So it's not actually aid. It's aid, but it's aid to bad people. And I think a lot of people, I don't know if you've seen it, but a lot of people have seen the picture of an Al Qaeda leader in Syria inside of a USAID tent. So when we're talking about USAID, foreign aid going to Syria, you can count on a lot of that going to Al Qaeda, for instance. That's just one instance. Karzai, the CIA was coming in, they were dropping plastic bags of money, brown paper bags full of money for him, I mean, it just gets absurd. And this is when we're, when we're basically bankrupt, when we're, $18 trillion in debt, and we're having to give, money away to, stupid murderers and, corrupt politicians and all this other stuff. I mean, we have enough corrupt politicians in this country to worry about. I don't think we should be worrying about, corrupt politicians in other countries. I think we should just leave that part out, but that's just me. And another thing I'd like to talk about when it comes to foreign aid is when it finally does go to the people, it actually, a lot of time, it adversely affects them. So for instance, somebody has it's called the egg theory. So somebody has a chicken coop, and they have a bunch of chickens, and the chickens are laying eggs, so on and so forth, and all of a sudden U.S. aid comes in, they drop off a bunch of eggs. It may not be eggs, it may be wheat or whatever, and those eggs are highly subsidized by the government, by our government. So let's just say they drop off these eggs, it's highly subsidized by our government. The reason why it's subsidized by our government is to maintain high prices, so the farmers make a lot of money off of it, and they drop off these eggs. So what does that do to the price of eggs in Zimbabwe or Kenya or whatever? Well, that raises the price, or that lowers the price, I'm sorry. That lowers the price dramatically to a point where the farmers in Zimbabwe can't even, compete with those prices because people are getting it for free. Of course the price is going to be down. It's basically free. So they're going to have to sell their chickens, they're going to have to sell their coop, and then what happens when, the U.S. aid stops? Well, then nobody gets any fucking eggs. And then somebody, tries to, buy a coop, they build a coop again, they raise all these chickens again, and then all of a sudden the U.S. drops all these eggs in again. And then the guy loses his business. I mean, it's just absolutely absurd when you think about it. It's not aid, it's complete control. It has nothing to do with helping people. It has everything to do with controlling other governments. So whenever they talk about, helping poor people, they're not helping poor people. They're fucking controlling another government so they can do whatever they want them to do. And I'll get to another aspect of that subject, controlling other governments and hurting the poor. And what I'm going to get to is the IMF, which is the World Bank. And I'm going to do that in my next section, so I'll be right back.